Hey Justin, just heading home from work, and I started to write this email the day after we spoke the other day. Just had some further thoughts about monitoring strength and versus range of motion versus mechanics, etc., that we were talking about on the back of the Ryan Croton post. And I thought it was going to be simpler to try and do this than try and put it all down in an email. But for me, in my experience, the reason strength is number one is it's a fail-safe for a while. Being super strong gives you the potential, and this is, I think the key words here are potential, capability, etc. But it gives you the potential to be more efficient with your movements. So, for example, a pitcher driving down the mound, if he is otherworldly strong in a squat or a lunge or something like that, then he is capable of getting down the mound at whatever rate is needed to throw 95 miles an hour with less effort than someone who can barely squat their own body weight. It means that the weaker athlete is driving down the mound closer to max effort every single time, which is going to be more fatiguing for him and therefore increasing the risk of injury, because now he can't tolerate the forces needed to. And the thing about pitching, like most sporting skills, is it's an outcome. So he's still going to find a way to throw 95 because that's what the situation demands, as opposed to just giving it up and saying, sorry coach, I can only throw 80 now, I'll do my best. Over my career, you see a loss of range of motion within, between innings or something like that, but it's not a true loss of motion. If you measure them passively, they still, whether it's total motion of the shoulder, whether it's a straight leg raise for hamstrings or whatever, because they're so warm in the middle of battle, they typically have the same, if not better, range than they would normally. And again, I think that loss that you were alluding to, at least in my understanding of the conversation, is more likely a skill and a mental barrier where they're getting a bit tired, so they're not maybe pushing as hard down the mound or trying as hard to stay separated or whatever the case is, but the difference to them might be negligible. And this is where I see that article about the finger flexion strength that Ryan shared, and those Brendan Elliott, who was the lead author on that paper, presented at the conference in New York. And I think that's a really interesting tool to start to be able to use with pitchers. But this is where I believe something like DVS could be such a game changer as well, because we shouldn't just be looking for ways to remove pitchers from play, but using it as a coaching tool. So particularly a veteran guy that knows their mechanics well, if you were still playing and I was working for your team and was able to come to you and say, hey Justin, the data shows that your stride length has shortened about half a foot over the last inning, you may be good enough and strong enough to then make that adjustment and go, okay, I need to push a bit harder into the rubber and get that back to where it needs to be for me to safely throw the ball the way I need to, from an injury point of view, but also from a performance point of view. And so, what I thought that the point that you were making was, I don't believe monitoring range of motion between innings, the way they measured the finger flexion strength, would have the same value in terms of trying to identify a risk of injury, because I don't think the way to test it in terms of the passive range of motion would show anything. But I think monitoring range of motion functionally using DVS, TrackMan, whatever, and the losses there has big value, but I still believe it's tied to strength. And the reason I made the comments I did on Ryan's post regarding strength are that it gives the athlete a safety net and a buffer zone. If you are really strong, but you are getting a little bit tired with your mechanics and maybe a little bit lazy, for want of a better word, but you're not necessarily aware of it, and so there is a bit of a loss of range of motion or whatever, then being strong can have a protective effect for a while. You do it enough and anything's going to break. But I think the key part of the strength argument that's missing is what range is the athlete strong in. And we need, typically strength training occurs in a mid to short range of movement. We need an athlete really strong at the ends of range, the long ranges of movement. And that's what I found so interesting about the finger flexion study, and what I'm looking into a little bit myself now, and from what you were telling me about your own grip strength, I reckon that's a huge factor as to why you didn't have any elbow issues, despite what your mechanics and what your shoulder and showed, was because you were able to buffer your UCL so well. But most of the time when we test grip strength, we test a closed fist like this, as opposed to at the diameter of a baseball and at the fingertips, which is when a pitcher needs it. So again, it's that where are we being elitely strong? And I think, you found it in your own experiences testing athletes on their grip strength, how much lower they were than you. And I reckon, I'm really confident that that's why you didn't have elbow troubles despite the mechanics that you displayed, because you had such above average grip strength that it protected your UCL from yourself. And that's where I think that's where we have to get to in terms of trying to keep these guys healthy and performing. Isn't just being brute force strong, but it's being brute force strong in key positions and being able to then take that brute force strength in key positions into the game, using tools like DVS and stuff like that. So anyway, mate, I hope some of that makes sense for you, but it was just a few things that rattled around in my head after we spoke, and I was conscious of your time of night, and I was also rushing out the door a little bit for a family function, and so I thought it was easier to try and put it all down like this. But look forward to chatting about it again soon, mate.